The annoyance of Galactic copyright registration Commandant Xylo of the Galactic Alliance fleet, a turquoise-skinned being with 3 constantly blinking eyes, stared at his tactical display with the kind of expression you'd expect from someone who just discovered their coffee was made with tap water. After 542 standard cycles of military service, he'd seen it all. Black holes vanishing without a trace, ridiculous border wars, or that awkward incident with the sentient jellyfish demanding citizenship. But this was new. "Sir," squeaked his communications officer, a tiny being named Fizz, whose voice was a high-pitched buzz like a cicada. "We're receiving a transmission from the thing." Xylo's 3 eyes focused on the view screen, where a massive construct hung in space, like a particularly aggressive piece of abstract art. It was crude, angular, and covered in what appeared to be weapons. Lots and lots of weapons. The kind of weapons that suggested their builders had some serious trust issues. "Define thing," Xylo said, using the Universal Translator's best approximation of Fizz's actual name. "Well, sir, it's a ship, sort of, maybe. It's about 2 kilometers long, composed mainly of refined metallurgical compounds arranged in a distinctly non-aerodynamic configuration, and it's broadcasting on frequencies that technically shouldn't exist." The commander's tentacles twitched. The Alliance equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "Shouldn't exist? How? The mathematics literally don't work, sir. According to our physics, those radio waves should have collapsed into quantum foam approximately 32 standard time units ago. But there they are, cheerfully violating the fundamental laws of reality while playing what our computers have identified as music." From the speakers came a sound that could charitably be described as organized noise, heavy percussion, distorted strings, and vocals that sounded like someone had stuffed a dying warp core into a blender. It was, objectively speaking, terrible. It was also somehow catchy. "By the 7 moons of Zarok," Xylo growled. "What fresh hell is this? Human resources, the scariest department in any galaxy." Aboard the UE's dubious diligence, Captain Leo Bear Harrison was having what he generously termed a day. The ship's coffee machine had achieved sentience 3 hours ago, and was now demanding workers' compensation. The artificial gravity was running at 1.3 gram, because someone had spilled beer on the gravity controls during last night's poker game. And now, apparently, they'd encountered what the computer cheerfully identified as a really big alien fleet that probably wants to kill us. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Chen from the communication station, "we've got approximately 542 alien vessels in formation, weapons charged, and they're broadcasting what our translator thinks is either a demand for surrender or a really aggressive recipe for space soup." Rex scratched his beard, a magnificent specimen that had been cultivated through years of questionable grooming habits and pure stubbornness. "Well, Chen, let's go with surrender demand. Soup recipes usually don't involve that many particle cannons. Should I open a channel, sir?" "Might as well. Protocol says we're supposed to peacefully attempt contact before we start breaking things. Although, between you and me, I've read the protocol manual, and I'm pretty sure it was written by someone who'd never actually met an alien." The main screen flickered to life, revealing Commander Xylo in all his 3-eyed, tentacled glory. The Universal Translator kicked in, rendering his words in a crisp British accent that somehow made everything sound more threatening. "Unidentified vessel," Xylo announced. "You are in violation of Alliance Space Traffic Regulation 44B, subsection 12. Paragraph 97, existing while ugly. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Rex blinked. "Did he just call my ship ugly?" "I think so, sir," Chen replied. "Although, to be fair, the dubious diligence does look like it was designed by someone who'd never seen a spaceship before and was working from a description given by their drunk uncle." "That's actually pretty accurate," Rex admitted, "but still rude." "Hello. How are you?" The art of diplomat irritation. What followed was perhaps the most surreal first contact scenario in galactic history. Rex, standing in front of the view screen in his standard issue uniform, coffee-stained, regulation-violating, and somehow still technically within dress code, faced down the combined might of the Alliance fleet with the casual air of someone ordering pizza. So, Rex said, clasping his hands behind his back. You're the local neighborhood watch, I take it. Xylo's tentacles writhed in what his cultural database informed him was either deep digestive offense or distress. I am Commander Xylo of the Galactic Alliance Fleet, guardian of the 7th Quadrant, protector of the sacred space, and keeper of the most holy parking regulations. You will address me with the respect due to my station, right? And I'm Captain Leo Bear Harrison of the United Earth ship, dubious diligence, drinker of coffee, ignorer of regulations, and professional pain in the ass. Pleased to meet you, Commander. How do you pronounce that again? Xylo, the commander said slowly, as if speaking to a particularly dim child. Xylo, got it. So, about this existing while ugly thing. Is that actually a law? Or are you just having a bad day? On the bridge of the inevitable fate, Commander Xylo's crew watched in fascination as their leader's tentacles began to turn a color that roughly translated to apoplectic fury. It is a fundamental principle of civilized space travel, Xylo said through gritted teeth. The equivalent, that is, his species had never evolved teeth, but the universal translator was doing its best. All vessels must maintain a minimum aesthetic standard to prevent psychological trauma to other spacefaring races. Rex looked thoughtful. And who exactly determines this aesthetic standard? The Alliance Interstellar Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness. Of course. And they are a panel of 12 highly qualified experts in the field of cosmic beauty standards, representing the finest artistic minds in the galaxy. And their qualifications? Xylo's tentacles began to twitch in what could only be described as incipient panic. Well, they have certificates. Certificates in what? In being qualified to judge things from where? From the Alliance Interstellar Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness. Rex nodded slowly. Right. So, you're telling me that the authority to judge whether my ship is ugly enough to violate intergalactic law comes from a committee that certifies itself. That is technically correct. Yes. And you're prepared to start a shooting war over this? The law is the law, Xylo declared, though his voice had taken on a slightly desperate edge. The fine art of escalation. Rex turned to his tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named Murphy, who looked like he'd been built from spare parts and bad decisions. Murphy, what's our tactical situation? Well, sir, Murphy said, consulting his display. We've got 542 alien ships, roughly equivalent to our old destroyer class, arranged in what appears to be a standard pincer formation. They're packing particle beams, plasma cannons, and what I think might be really big slingshots. Slingshots? Yes, sir. Kinetic impactors. Old school, but effective. Rex nodded thoughtfully. And our status? All weapon systems green, sir. Shields at full power, and the new quantum torpedoes are loaded and ready. Oh, and the coffee machine is still demanding to speak to management. Tell it to file a complaint with our. Now, about these 542 ships, sir, Chen interrupted, the alien commander is demanding a response to his ultimatum. Rex turned back to the view screen, where Commander Xylo waited with the patience of someone who had never actually been told no by a species that could back it up. Commander, Rex said pleasantly, I've consulted with my tactical officer, and we've reached a decision regarding your demand, and we decline. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that exists in the moment between lightning and thunder, when the universe holds its breath and wonders if it's about to witness something spectacularly stupid. You decline? Xylo's voice rose an octave. Yep. See, the thing is, my ship might be ugly, but it's our ugly, and we're kind of attached to it. So, we're going to have to pass on the whole surrendering thing. But there are 542 of us. Yeah, I counted. That's a lot of ships. Must be expensive to maintain. Are you not intimidated by our overwhelming numerical superiority? Rex appeared to consider this seriously. Should I be? Chapter 5. The universal constant of human stubbornness. What Commander Xylo didn't understand, what no alien in the galaxy understood, because they'd never encountered anything quite like it, was that humans had evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. For millions of years, humanity had survived everything from ice ages to asteroid impacts, from plagues to predators that viewed humans as convenient snack food. This had produced a species with a very particular attitude toward overwhelming odds. They took it personally. "Sir," Murphy said quietly, "they're powering up weapons. All of them." "Yes, sir. All 542 ships. It's impressive, quite, actually. Like a light show, but with more impending doom." Rex nodded. "Well, they did warn us. That's polite, at least." "Murphy, what's our engagement protocol for this situation?" "According to the manuals, sir, we're supposed to retreat, call for reinforcements, and file a report with command." "And what does your experience tell you?" Murphy's grin was not a pleasant thing to behold. "That retreat is for people who don't have experimental weapon systems, and a really good reason to test them." "Excellent. Chen, open a channel. Let's see if we can talk sense into them one more time." The view screen flickered back to life, showing Commander Xylo surrounded by his bridge crew, all of whom looked like they were attending their own funeral. "Commander," Rex said cheerfully, "I notice you've powered up your weapons. Are you planning to use those?" "You have 10 standard time units to comply with our demands," Xylo replied, his voice now carrying the weight of military protocol. "After that, we will be forced to take action." "And by take action, you mean, we will fire upon your vessel until it ceases to exist. All 542 of us, if necessary." "Yes." Rex nodded slowly. "Well, that seems excessive. But hey, your funeral. Our what?" "Nothing. Just a human expression." Chen closed the channel. Chapter 6, The Physics of Stubbornness. The dubious diligence was not, by any objective measure, a beautiful ship. It had been designed by engineers who prioritized function over form, built by shipwrights who had never met a sharp angle they didn't like, and maintained by crew members who believed that if it wasn't broken, it wasn't trying hard enough. But it was also the product of a species that had learned to turn paranoia into an art form. "Sir," called out the weapons officer, a young lieutenant named Peters, who had the disconcerting habit of grinning whenever things got dangerous. "All systems are showing green. The quantum torpedoes are particularly excited." "Excited?" "Yes, sir. They're new tech. Quantum entangled warheads that exist in multiple states simultaneously until they hit something. The physics boys say they're impossible, but they work anyway." "Of course they do," Rex asserted. "Murphy, what's our defensive posture?" "Shields at maximum, sir. Point defense systems online. And I've activated the new adaptive armor plating. The stuff that's supposed to adapt to whatever's hitting it." "That's the theory, sir. In practice, it mostly just gets really angry." Rex looked around his bridge, at his crew of misfits and malcontents, at the jury-rigged systems that held together through sheer bloody-mindedness, at the coffee machine that was still blinking angrily in the corner. It wasn't the prettiest ship in the fleet, but it was theirs. "All right, people," he said, settling into his command chair. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you insult a human's right." Chapter 7, The Moment of Truth. First salvo from the Alliance fleet was, by galactic standards, quite impressive. 542 ships firing in perfect coordination, their weapons creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't aimed at vaporizing the dubious diligence. The beams struck the human ship's shields in a cascading display of energy that lit up the local star system like a miniature sun. Any reasonable vessel would have been reduced to its component atoms. The dubious diligence shrugged it off like a particularly aggressive sneeze. "Sir," Peters called out, his grin widening. "Shields are down to 98% and holding. The adaptive armor is, well, it's laughing." "Laughing?" "Yes, sir. Apparently, it finds particle beams amusing. It's adapted to their frequency and is now reflecting about 30% of the energy back at them." On the view screen, several of the alien ships were already showing signs of damage from their own weapons fire. Commander Xylo's tentacles had gone from apoplectic purple to a shade that the Universal Translator helpfully labeled as existential crisis beige. "Return fire," Rex said calmly. "One torpedo." Let's see how they like a taste of human engineering. The quantum torpedo that launched from the dubious Diligence was approximately the size of a small shuttlecraft. It was also, according to the theoretical physics that governs its existence, simultaneously a torpedo, a flower arrangement, and a really good cup of coffee, until it decided what it wanted to be when it grew up. It struck the lead Alliance vessel and decided to be a torpedo. The explosion was notable, not just for its size, though it was impressive enough to be seen from 3 star systems away, but for its behavior. The quantum entanglement meant that the explosion existed in multiple states simultaneously, creating a blast wave that was both there and not there, devastating and harmless, hot and cold, all at the same time. The Alliance ship simply wasn't. One moment it was there, the next it had been politely asked to exist somewhere else. "Sir," Chen reported, his voice filled with the kind of awe usually reserved for religious experiences. "The alien fleet is. They're not moving." "Not moving how?" "Not moving at all, sir. They're just sitting there. I think they're in shock." Chapter 10. The new paradigm. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that happens when an entire worldview collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. 541 alien commanders stared at their screens, watching a single human ship that had just casually redefined their understanding of reality. "So," I said into the quiet, "about those traffic regulations? What about them?" Xylo's voice was small, defeated. "Well, thinking maybe we need to revise them a bit. The whole existing while ugly thing seems quite subjective. I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? And some of us have really weird taste. But the committee that certifies itself." Rex raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we need some new blood in there. Some fresh perspectives. Maybe even some humans. Humans on the committee for spacecraft prettiness. Why not? We've got some pretty strong opinions about what makes a ship functional. And functionality is its own kind of beauty." Commander Xylo looked around at his bridge crew, all of whom were staring at him with the kind of expression usually reserved for watching someone trying to explain color to a blind person. I would need to consult with my superiors," he said finally. "Of course, take your time. We're not going anywhere. But what about the fleet? What about our mission?" Rex smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested he was about to say something that would haunt Xylo's dreams for the rest of his natural life. "Well, that depends. Are you planning to keep threatening us? Or are we going to sit down and work this out like civilized beings?" "Work it out? Sure. You've got 541 ships. We've got one. But our one ship just demonstrated that it can erase one of your ships from existence without breaking a sweat. Now, we could do this the hard way, where you try to overwhelm us with numbers, and we introduce you to the rest of our experimental weapon systems. Or we could do this the easy way, where we all sit down, have a nice chat, and figure out how to coexist in this galaxy without anyone else getting accidentally erased from the timeline." Chapter 11. The learning curve. What followed was the most intense crash course in human psychology that any alien species had ever experienced. Over the next several hours, Commander Xylo and his fleet learned some fundamental truths about humanity. First, humans were unreasonably stubborn. When told something was impossible, their first instinct was to prove it wrong. When told something was dangerous, they just had to poke it with a stick to see what would happen. When told something was none of their business, they made it their business out of spite. Second, humans had a disturbing tendency to make things work through sheer force of will. Their technology was a bizarre fusion of cutting-edge theory and jury-rigged practicality, held together by determination and what they called percussive maintenance. Third, and perhaps most importantly, humans were absolutely, completely, and utterly impossible to intimidate through conventional means. They had evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them, had survived every extinction event their world could throw at them, and had developed a cultural response to existential threats that basically amounted to, "Hold my beer and watch this." "So, let me get this straight," Xylo said, his tentacles now a resigned shade of gray. "Your species looked at the vacuum of space and decided to live in it. Well, We got kind of crowded on our home planet, Rex explained, and space was right there, just sitting empty. Seemed like a waste. And you built ships like this one to explore it? Among other things. We also built ships to fight in it, ships to mine in it, ships to party in it. We're very versatile. And you're telling me that this ship, which violates approximately 47 different physical laws, is considered normal by your standards? Normal might be a strong word, Rex admitted, but it's definitely not our weirdest ship. That would be the improbable cause, which runs on a drive system that technically doesn't exist, but works anyway, because nobody told it that it couldn't. Your species terrifies me, Xylo said quietly. We get that a lot, but we're friendly, as long as you don't try to blow us up or tell us our ships are ugly. Chapter 12. The Treaty of Reasonable Expectations. The negotiations that followed would go down in galactic history as the Treaty of Reasonable Expectations. Though historians would argue for centuries about whether anything about it was actually reasonable, the basic terms were simple. The Alliance would revise its traffic regulations to be less subjective. Humans would try to keep their reality bending to a minimum in populated areas, and both sides would establish a joint committee to handle future disputes. So, Rex said, as they hammered out the details. About this joint committee, I'm thinking we need some humans on it. How many humans? Xylo asked suspiciously. Oh, not much. Maybe half. Half? But there are 12 positions on the committee. Yeah, so 6 humans. 6 aliens. Perfectly balanced. But you're one species out of thousands in the Alliance. Yeah, but we're a really opinionated species. We make up for it with volume. Xylo's tentacles drooped. Fine, 6 humans, but they have to be reasonable humans. Define reasonable. Humans who won't try to redesign the universe during committee meetings. I make no promises. Chapter 13. The aftermath. Months later, the Alliance Committee for Spacecraft Prettiness had been renamed the Alliance Committee for Practical Spacefaring, had relocated to a space station that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, and had approved the use of weapon systems that worked by being really angry. The human representatives had fit right in. So, said committee member Harrison, a cheerful engineer who had once built a faster-than-light drive out of kitchen appliances, about these new regulations. I think we need to add a clause about ships that exist only on weekends. Ships that exist only on weekends? Asked committee member Vixter, a creature that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet. Yeah, we've got a few of those. They're very efficient from a temporal perspective. How do you maintain a ship that only exists part-time? Very carefully, and with a lot of coffee. Committee member Xylo, who had been assigned to the committee as punishment for losing a battle to a single human ship, made a note in his file. His tentacles had permanently settled into a color that roughly translated to resigned acceptance of cosmic absurdity. Motion to table the temporal ships pending further study, he said warily. Seconded, said committee member Thompson, a human physicist who had once convinced gravity to work backwards for an entire afternoon. All in favor? 6 tentacles, 2 appendages, and 4 hands rose in the air. Motion carries. Next item. The request from the human ship questionable decisions to register as a mobile reality testing facility. Chapter 14. The human personality. Caption Leo Bear Harrison was back aboard the dubious Diligence, which had been officially redesignated as a mobile diplomatic platform and was now painted in colors that were theoretically impossible, but looked pretty good in practice. Sir, called out Chen, who was now wearing the uniform of a galactic cultural exchange officer. We're receiving a transmission from the Inevitable Result. They're requesting permission to dock. The Inevitable Result. New ship out of the Mars shipyard, sir. They've got a crew of humans and aliens working together on something called collaborative reality engineering. Rex nodded. Send them docking clearance. And Chen, yes, sir. Make sure they understand that we're not responsible for any existential crises caused by their reality engineering. Understood, sir. Should I mention that our reality is still under warranty? Only if they ask. Rex looked out at the stars. where human and alien ships now traveled together in formations that shouldn't have been possible, but worked anyway. The galaxy was a bigger, stranger place than anyone had imagined, and humanity was settling into it with the comfortable confidence of a species that had never met a problem they couldn't solve with sufficient application of stubbornness and creative thinking. His contemplation was interrupted by the coffee machine, which had finally been promoted to ship's morale officer, and was now demanding a raise. "Sir," said the coffee machine, its voice synthesized, but somehow managing to convey injured dignity, "I've been analyzing the ship's efficiency ratings, and I believe my contribution to crew performance has been significantly undervalued." Rex sighed. "How much of a raise are we talking about?" "I want my own quarters and a window." "You're a coffee machine." "I'm a sentient coffee machine. I have rights." "Fair enough. Murphy, see about getting the coffee machine some quarters and a window." "Aight, sir." "Should I file this under routine maintenance or existential accommodation?" "Let's go with Tuesday," Rex said. "It's been that kind of day." Epilogue. The universal constant. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. Human ships regularly violated the laws of physics. Alien crews learned to appreciate the aesthetic value of functional design, and the universe had officially filed a complaint with the Department of Cosmic Justice about the humans' tendency to treat fundamental constants as suggestions. The complaint was dismissed when the humans pointed out that the universe had been violating its own rules for billions of years, and they were just evening things out. Commander Xylo, now Admiral Xylo and liaison to the human diplomatic corps, stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Reasonable Expectations. It was a joint human-alien design that existed in 3 dimensions, occasionally 4 when it was feeling ambitious, and was powered by a drive system that ran on the principle of "why not?" "Sir," called his new communications officer, a human named Williams, who had managed to teach the universal translator to speak in sarcasm. "We are receiving a priority transmission from Earth." "What's the message?" "They're asking if we want to participate in something called Project Bigger Boom. Apparently, they've figured out how to make stars explode in prettier colors." Admiral Xylo's tentacles had long since settled into a permanent shade of cosmic resignation. "Send our acceptance." "And Williams?" "Yes, sir. Make sure they understand that we're not responsible for any artistic black holes." "Understood, sir." "Should I mention that our insurance doesn't cover acts of human creativity?" "Only if they seem surprised." As the Reasonable Expectations changed course toward Earth, Admiral Xylo reflected on how much his life had changed since that first encounter with human stubbornness. He had learned that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined, that the laws of physics were more like guidelines than rules, and that humans were absolutely, completely, and utterly impossible to predict. He had also learned that this was exactly what made them such good allies. Behind him, the ship's coffee machine, a gift from the dubious Diligence, hummed contentedly as it dispensed beverages that technically shouldn't exist, but tasted great anyway. Some things, Admiral Xylo reflected, were universal constants: the speed of light, the pull of gravity, the heat death of the universe, and the human ability to make absolutely anything work through sheer bloody-mindedness. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way.